We begin in Libya, where competing militias and armed groups remain a stumbling block to rebuilding post-revolution Libya. Disarming the rogue militias and collecting stashes of weapons from across the country remains a challenge and has left many Libyans feeling unsafe. Clementine Logan tells us more.
2 years after the revolution that ousted Muammar Gaddafi, the Libyan government is still struggling to solve security problems across the country. The recent kidnapping of the Prime Minister an example of how far it has to go in its efforts to restore law and order. Close connections between some of the armed militias and political groups in the National Congress make the situation more complex.
Weapons and force, which is in the street, bigger 1,000 times more than weapon which is in the government hands. So when you are weak, you cannot rule. So the secret is that Zaidan or anybody will be in his place. He cannot rule the country because he doesn't have the force.
The Libyan government exercises little control over the situation, and until the various groups agree to submit to the authority of a central government and lay down their weapons, power will remain fragmented among the revolutionary brigades.
How come you are a congressman and you have a militia? So when we discuss any point, you don't like my opinion, so you might threaten me with your militia.
Libyans are still waiting for an official national army and police force to emerge along with a stable government. It's taking longer than expected. Robert Soy, CCTV.
2 years after the fall of Gaddafi, Libya's internal political struggles have intensified. The recent kidnapping of Libyan Prime Minister Ali Zaidan dealt a heavy blow to the government and the country. Now, Libyans are bracing for more turmoil after Zaidan implicated political rivals who were behind his abduction, claiming the incident was an attempted coup. Meanwhile, the leader of Libya's Muslim Brotherhood said the Congress is looking for an alternative candidate to replace Zaidan.
Accusations continue to fly over who kidnapped Ali Zaidan. As for the Prime Minister, he's pointing the finger at his political opponents. He accuses Congress of disrupting government functions and has vowed to investigate further, saying the government would not give in to pressure.
They were trying to kidnap him in order to change him by force. Yes, it gives, let's say, force to the other parties who were against taking out Ali Zaidan. They gathered Thursday. All the groups, they will be one group against the fanatics who were trying to kick Ali Zaidan and who kidnapped Ali Zaidan.
Political analysts believe internal power struggles began when the revolution ended. Certain tribes and political parties claiming they made the biggest contribution to ending Gaddafi's rule have conflicting visions of how to rebuild Libya.
By the 20th of October, Gaddafi was killed, and the Libyan people, everyone started looking around and asking, what do I have in it? They see Libya not a people with a very strong belief in nationalism and building a strong country. They all thought of Libya as a cake, and everyone wanted to have his share.
In July 2012, Libya held its first elections in half a century. The Secular National Force Alliance won a majority in Congress, while the Justice and Construction Party, led by the Islamist Muslim Brotherhood, came second. The two parties have been competing with each other ever since. Ali Zaidan was elected Prime Minister of the transitional government in October last year, with support from the National Forces alliances. In May this year, Libya passed a law that banned officials who served the previous regime from working in government. Armed militia groups besieged government institutions, demanding Zaidan and other ministers resign. The secularists and Islamists are more divided than ever. Zaidan, however, is facing increasing pressure from within parliament, with the Islamist Party challenging most of his policies. Clementine Logan, CCTV.
It's exactly 2 years now, 2 years ago, on October 20th, when an uprising in Libya led to the ouster of former leader Muammar Gaddafi. Libyans who had been oppressed by the previous government fought for freedom and democracy at a heavy price. However, many of them complain today that they're not happy with the pace of change in post-revolution Libya.
The ruins of Bab el-Azizia military base destroyed by NATO bombs during the war lie quietly in the center of Tripoli. Homeless Libyans struggle to survive in tents. Misrata, which suffered the heaviest fighting in 2011, has not seen much reconstruction either. In the eastern city of Benghazi, robberies, explosions, and assassinations take place almost every day. Libyan people are frustrated at the lack of security and order 2 years after the revolution.
I'm not happy with what's happening right now. These militias and Islamists kill innocent people. All this happened because we don't have a strong government. These things happened after the revolution and take a long time to fix.
On February 17th, we fought for our freedom and democracy, but nothing has changed since then. We have no jobs, no money, nothing at all. If we continue like this, Libya will remain divided.
Well, let's now get further insights into the situation there in Libya. We're joined by Ziad Akel from Egypt's Al-Ahram Center for Political and Strategic Studies. He's live in Cairo. Mr. Akel, thank you for joining us. So we're 2 years on from Libya's revolution, but the situation looks pretty stark. What would you say are the most pressing issues that need to be addressed?
Well, of course, there is the major security issue, which seems to be the biggest challenge that is facing Libya right now, because it simply not only represents a very powerful factor that helps in achieving the different goals of the revolution, it actually also affects all other challenges. There is a great challenge facing Libya as well, having to do with how the economy is performing. Libyan economy, although oil-rich, still very, very much underperforming. And definitely the different ideas of state institutions are still very weak in Libya. When Muammar al-Gaddafi fell, he did not leave behind a state. Libyans had to rebuild a state from the very beginning. So empowering state institutions, working the economy to its potential, and definitely retaining security are the most pressing issues facing Libya at the moment.
And of course, we're hearing also about increasing internal power struggles. How is this likely to play out?
Excuse me? I did not hear the question.
No, I'm just asking you about the increasing internal power struggles that we're hearing about there in Libya and how this is likely to pan out.
Well, the problem right now in Libya is the absolute absence of a powerful central authority. And this is why political struggles seem to be extremely divided. And there's definitely an absence of any law that sort of regulates how people own arms. So we have different political divisions, differently diffused geographically, all armed, and it is very, very likely to plan out into different regional forces, into basically a parallel state. There will be the Libyan parliament in its place, but the laws and decisions made by this parliament will simply be challenged by every regional militia within the course of the different political conflicts that will emerge in Libya in the coming phase.
Let me take you back to the first issue that we discussed, and that was about the most pressing needs there. You talked about security being one of the key issues that need to be addressed. So is the international community helping improve the situation at all?
Well, the problem is that all the attempts to actually fight the lack of security are actually addressing the very, very wrong issues. So, for example, wanting to collect the arms that are widely held by the people is not simply done by advertising in the media that we would like you to turn in your arms. There must be real alternatives offered to the people through real jobs, through real economic growth, and through real motivations for them to desert the idea of the militia, desert the idea of making their own security and actually heading to the state for that. So the attempts to actually control the security situation need to be very, very much acquainted with economic growth. Unless economic growth, real economic growth and employment happens in Libya, the security situation will remain as terrible as it is at the pretty moment.
All right, Mr. Ziad Akhil joining us there of the Middle East Center for Political Strategies. Sorry, from the Middle East Center for Political Strategies. Thank you very much. And Strategic Studies, thank you very much for joining us live in Cairo. While you're watching Africa Live, let's take a break. Coming up, Ethiopia rises from the ashes of hunger and starvation. We explore how they did it. And Guinea's ruling party declared winner of the concluded election, sparking opposition uproar.
We follow the latest trends in global politics, economics, culture and sport, and how Africa fits into the global picture. You decide what's important.
We need some trade and justice.
Africa's future will be determined by Africa.
For women's equal opportunity, for a better life.
We have to change something, and it's not the outsiders.
Talk Africa, a new voice for the world.
The President of Cote d'Ivoire, Alassane Ouattara, has invited refugees who fled the country after the post-election violence of 2010-2011 to return home. President Ouattara made the plea during his recent visit to Liberia, where tens of thousands of refugees still remain in exile 2 years after deadly violence rocked the West African nation. Speaking at a conference in Liberia, Ouattara assured his countrymen that the West African nation was stable. He was attending a 4-day meeting in Liberia with his fellow counterpart, Ellen Sirleaf Johnson. The meeting was aimed at strengthening ties between the two nations and also was used as a platform to promote peace.
If we notice the clear and unanimous improvement in security in Western Ivory Coast and Eastern Liberia, it is thanks to you manifest to contribute, along with our nations, to the reinforcement, the respect, the protection of civilians, and the guarantee of the respect for human rights.
In other news, across Africa, Guinea's ruling party and its allies have been declared the winners of last month's legislative elections, but the opposition is refusing to recognize the result, which international observers said were marred by irregularities. The opposition's reaction has raised fears that violence could erupt in the West African country. United Nations Secretary General Ban Ki-moon appealed for calm on Friday, before results were announced. Controversy stalked the polls, which should have taken place within 6 months of Conde's inauguration in December 2010. However, they were pushed back, with opposing factions unable to agree on conditions for the elections. Guinea has remained crippled by political deadlock, ethnic rivalries and recurring rumors of coup plot. Opposition protests have repeatedly been met by deadly police violence, and security was beefed up in Conakry after the vote. Security in Uganda's capital, Kampala, was beefed up after the U.S. Embassy put out an alert for a possible terror attack on Saturday. Armed policemen with sniffer dogs were stationed at major shopping malls. The heightened security measures come after Al-Qaeda-linked militant group Al-Shabaab staged a deadly attack at Westgate Mall in Kenya's capital, Nairobi. Uganda's police spokesman said security forces were aware of an imminent threat and were investigating whether the potential attackers were already in the country and where they might carry carry out the attack. A car bomb exploded on Saturday near an Egyptian army intelligence building in the Suez Canal city of Ismailia, wounding at least 6 soldiers. According to security sources, another unexploded car bomb was also found. The force of the blast caused part of the military intelligence building's outer wall to collapse. Militants, mostly based in North Sinai, have escalated attacks on security targets since July 3rd, when the army deposed President Mohamed Morsi of the Muslim Brotherhood and installed a new government in response to mass protests against his rule. The Egyptian army launched a large military operation in September to clear the area of armed militants, seizing weapons including anti-aircraft missiles and hand grenades. Or to Ethiopia now, where 3 decades later, what remains fresh in the minds of many is the famine whose devastating magnitude was brought to the fore by renowned photojournalist the late Mohamed Amin. For years, Ethiopia was synonymous with hunger. That was then. Times have now changed since then. CCTV's Grum Chala brings us more details on how Ethiopia is gradually turning into a bread basket and how population is no longer victims to the pangs of hunger.
Tears of hunger and starvation in the Ethiopian highlands. Tens of thousands succumbed for lack of food. This was the devastating picture of Ethiopia 30 years ago, the time when Ethiopians were subjected to food rations. According to reports from 1984, up to 120 children died on a single day in the refugee camps.
We can say that the kind of image that we saw, in 1984, 85, the world of Ethiopia is very much associated with famine. But the country has made a remarkable shift.
Thanks to the intensive agricultural activities, Ethiopia today takes pride in being food self-sufficient. Last year, the agriculture sector registered 8% growth, contributing massively to food security in the Eastern Africa country.
To move the country from this picture of a country driven by famine, stricken by conflict, to have a new image that is very much a country with a transformed economy, or one of the most fast transforming economy. And this is really impressive.
Ethiopia has the second largest population in Africa after Nigeria. This population growth, according to experts, puts a lot of pressure on the country, which has to shoulder the burden of feeding its population. Economists opine that this pressure could be overcome through elaborate youth employment programs.
We can take Ethiopia as a good example, that in the past 10 years Ethiopia able to create around 10 million employment opportunities. So this can be regarded as a good exercise.
Ethiopia now looks at commercial agriculture, with farmers targeting the export market.
The 1984 drought and famine had left Ethiopia badly scared. It visited death and destruction of untold proportions, notwithstanding the country's image that came tumbling like a pack of cards. To overcome this miserable past, Ethiopia is taking firm, elaborate steps to ensure sustainable economic growth. Group Data, CCTV, Addis Ababa, Ethiopia.
Senegal, like most other countries, finds itself in the grip of climate change, and to the authorities and local communities, addressing the adverse effects of climate change is becoming an issue to be addressed with urgency. CCTV's Desiree Cannon has more.
At certain localities, drought, flooding and especially sea progress and coastal erosion are observed. The former Minister of the Environmental Protection explains.
We are suffering the effects of the climate change at several levels here in Senegal. The major resources are disappearing, the lands are becoming poor, the rainfall is high, and sometimes rains do not come at the right time. We have a lot of bushfires during warm periods with the disappearance of thousands of hectares. But we addressed the issue as early as possible through awareness campaigns and restored the mangroves in many villages.
According to the Environment Minister, to address the present and potential impact of climate change, appropriate policies should be used at the same time at global, regional, national and community levels. Years of deforestation in favor of increased acreage for agricultural production have left communities prey to flood waters, which wash away the topsoil, carving canyons and ravines through the middle of villages. Some residents use volcanic stones to build walls against wind and water erosion. Desiree Canon, CCTV, Dakar, Senegal.
The Ministry of Tourism, Culture and Creative Arts of Ghana on Saturday honored Miss World Africa, Naa Shuter, for her thrilling performance at the just-ended Miss World 2013. Naa Shuter, who was the second runner-up at the Miss World Beauty Contest, revealed that she would be partnering with other beauty queens on the African continent to embark on a youth mentoring campaign. Ghana's participation at Miss World started in 1959. 22 contestants from Ghana have been there, but none has been able to make it to the top 10. Reason why Ghana is celebrating Naa for making the country proud. Let's take another quick break here on Africa Live straight ahead.